Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time the question comes to us from Sir Veritas, who asked this question in reference to everything going on with Charmin Obaid-Chinoy, the director of the upcoming Rey New Jedi Order movie. Hey Thor, for me this is a lot worse than anything before. It's one thing to make creative decisions that people did not like and get backlash. It happens and you can learn from it. It's another thing to choose staff that are specifically inflammatory towards the people frustrated by the creative decisions you made. Disney had every opportunity to make a Rey movie that could make people reconsider their opinion of the character. I was looking forward to it because I liked the character more than most. Now they have alienated everyone who might have given it a chance. And you know, ever since they announced the Rey movie at Celebration last year, and as someone who always kind of roots for Star Wars and the fandom, who does understand that yes, there are those out there who love the character of Rey and the sequel trilogy, and as someone who doesn't exactly want to see those people pissed off or anything, even if I don't personally like the films, I had this very, very tiny speck of hope somewhere down deep that existed among all my doubts that this movie, that the Rey movie, could somehow be really, really good. That it could even be something like this sort of olive branch to the fans that didn't like her, or the sequels, that sort of acknowledges that yes, we kind of screwed up the sequels and the character of Rey, among other characters in those films, and we're going to try and do much, much better going forward if you just give us this one more chance to make it right. And then somehow, miraculously, the film delivers on that promise, and it begins to soften the stance of some of the biggest Rey detractors out there. Not that it's something that will suddenly make everyone start loving the sequels or anything like that. That is never going to happen. But rather, it's something that could almost be this fresh start for the character and the franchise or the story that kept the sequels in the canon for those who had enjoyed them, and then made those who hadn't enjoyed them say, okay, I'll at least give this thing a fair chance going forward. And I know, believe me, I know that wasn't very likely to happen no matter what. I know there are those out there who will never come back to Star Wars as long as the sequels are canon, or that are just done with it no matter what at this point. That apathy has just set in and they just don't care anymore. I'm only saying that it wasn't impossible to make a movie that could have potentially began to fix things as long as the movie not only delivered but was pretty exceptional, and as long as the attitude around the movie of those creating it was the right one, as long as they did and said all the right things along the way. But, of course, that part of it, not only has it already been derailed with everything going on with what Charmin Obaid-Chinoy has said recently, as well as some comments she has made in the past, but you almost can't help but feel like, as the comment at the start was pointing out, but you can't help but feel like this wasn't just an, oops, we may have picked the wrong director for a Star Wars movie. This decision seems like it almost had to be done with the intent to eventually be inflammatory, or to antagonize some fans, and to maybe even cause the reaction we're now seeing. Or that, at the very least, Kathleen Kennedy, who I can only presume is the one who made this decision to hire Obaid-Chinoy, that she knew the likelihood of something like this happening was extremely high and did it anyway. Which then makes one ask, and I talked a lot about this in a video on my other channel yesterday, but it makes one ask what her motivation for this could possibly be. If you are Kathleen Kennedy, why would you hire someone with virtually no experience directing anything even remotely like Star Wars, who has primarily produced and directed documentaries, as well as someone who, though absolutely free to hold very feminist views, but that was almost certainly going to inject those views to some degree into a property that, if we're being honest, is on average watched by more men than women, unless of course Kennedy shares Obaid-Chinoy's desire to, as she once said, to make men feel uncomfortable. Is this somehow Kennedy's way of trying to quote-unquote prove the Star Wars fan base is sexist, and that actually Rey was a fantastic character who was treated unfairly by male fans? Is the reaction she's getting right now, and the one she'll almost certainly get should this movie actually end up coming out someday, is it exactly what she wanted because now she can say, or the media and others can say for her, see, look what happens when a woman directs a Star Wars movie. It made male fans absolutely lose their minds, and yes, I have already seen people saying this or claiming this online. However, here, shifting gears a bit, if you are Disney in all of this, and I'm still assuming they do care about making money more so than anything else, or at least I'm assuming their shareholders are more about money than any sort of ideology, though who knows at this point. But if you're Disney, or looking at it from their perspective, You'd have to imagine the best case scenario for them would be to see the sequels be, shall we say, redeemed, considering they're already just sitting there. They're already made, and so if they magically become more popular, they can just take full advantage of that. However, if something happens to put the proverbial final nail in the coffin of those films, if this Rey movie eventually comes out and is utterly rejected by the fans and loses hundreds of millions of dollars at the box office, and if the merchandise for it rots on store shelves and all of that, well then the sequel trilogy films and the whole time period becomes pretty much worthless to Disney. There's no way they could ever justify doing more with them if the majority of the fan base and the general audience has rejected them. In fact, when I try to figure out why in the world Disney is letting this happen, why they almost certainly greenlit or okayed Obaid-Chinoy directing the next Star Wars movie after what will be like a 7-year absence from theaters for the franchise, when or if it finally comes out, meaning you really want this to be a winner that reinvigorates things after so much time away. Well, for the life of me, I really can't figure out what they're thinking here. They have to know the high probability of this failing, right? They have to know there's a really, really good chance they will lose both fans and money over this. So could it be that the plan for it, the expectation for it, is to indeed fail, and thus they finally have what they will feel is enough justification to not only fire Kennedy, but to remove the sequels from the canon and to go a different route with the story altogether? Because to do both of those things, there would be a major backlash from some fans and the media. Firing Kennedy and removing the sequels from the canon would be seen as catering to the haters or toxic fans, and so the more concrete evidence Disney has and can point to, like a Rey movie being an absolute disaster that costs the company hundreds of millions of dollars and ruins a whole part of their IP, the sequels, well, the more they can justify the firing and removing of the films, not that some won't still attack them for it, of course. And so, in this very odd sort of way, if you are someone who wants to see Kennedy gone and the sequels removed, this all could be a kind of silver lining in what otherwise feels like the darkest hour. This could finally be what ends her time and sees a whole new direction for the franchise, or the return to an old one, shall we say. Though I know at this point it is a bit too late to do the sequel trilogy over again, considering we obviously can't get all the original actors back. Unless we get some sort of trilogy where they go all in on AI, and in that case, we just have to hope it isn't some sort of AI abomination that's worse than the current sequel trilogy in some ways. But anyway here, if you are someone who approves of the job Kennedy has done, or maybe enjoys the sequels, or at the very least likes Rey, or would perhaps like to see a good story with her going forward, and like I was basically saying at the top, a part of me wishes it could all work out that way for her and the fans who like her. But I really don't see how that ends up happening right now. I think if everything proceeds as currently planned, if Obaid-Chinoy makes this movie and doubles down on making men feel uncomfortable, not that she said that in reference to her Star Wars film, but considering the way she said it, the way she said she enjoys making men feel uncomfortable.
I like to make men uncomfortable. I enjoy making men uncomfortable.
If this film is anything like some fear it will be, then a lot of fans who are maybe on the fence right now about Rey and or the sequels, or who were just willing to give it a second chance, a lot of them, again going back to the comment or as it pointed out, either now or then when it comes out or after more is said about this film in the future, they're going to feel intentionally alienated, like this movie is being purposely made to antagonize them or prove some sort of point about Rey, or perhaps about men, and is not something they'll end up going to see or supporting. It's so very strange that a Rey movie may end up being exactly or achieving exactly what those who hate Rey want, and being the opposite of what those who love Rey want. It could end up being the end of the character and the end of the trilogy she was a part of. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about all this. Tell me if you think this film could ultimately see the sequel trilogy removed from the canon and Kennedy fired if it is an utter failure. Or you're always free to ask a question for a future lightning response video. You just got to start your comment off with "Hey Thor" and then ask away. Whatever you choose to do though, leave those comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.